Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of CHAR Technologies as well as the Cleantech Capital Platform Group. I'm James Sproula. For those of you that don't know me, please introduce yourself to me after the session. I want to know everybody in the room. And that's the first thing I want to say. I could literally introduce everyone in this room to everybody else, and there would be a meaningful reason for the conversation. It is a delight to be the, I call myself lead director of CHAR, Bill White, who I'll introduce and who will do the formal business. But there is no one that's involved with the Cleantech Group. And the reason that we have such a big, robust, full room is because of the things we've been doing and building over the last 10 years. By show of hands, if you could, who's been to one of our AGMs before? Please raise a hand. And if you've never been to one of our AGMs, please raise a hand. Okay, about half and half, and that's been the case ever since our first one. Our first one, we were literally just a shell, and it was in Woodbridge, north of Steeles, and a lot of people criticize us for that. I bought apple fritters, so I brought 4 dozen apple fritters, which I paid for myself, did not come from the shareholder purse, and I was criticized today for not having apple fritters, but I'll get to that in a moment. But the reality is we had 40 people show up. We now average over 150 between people in the room and online, and it is a delight to see so many people interested in what we've built and what we're going to continue to build. Now, I'm going to introduce a few of the people in the room, and the reason for that is you may want to go and talk to them. Specifically, we've got our CHAR board. Bill will be up at the podium, but Anton, if you could stand up. Anton came the furthest. He lives in Australia, but he's here for our AGM. Nik. Where's Nik? Nik Nanos, he'll be speaking later. Hugh, is Hugh in the room? So we'll have to make fun of Hugh later. I wish he was in the room. And then 2 of the people, Andrew White is going to be at the podium quite a bit. He's up here at the front. And I want to introduce Raquel. Where's Raquel? Please stand up, Raquel. She's our new CFO, so it's a delight to introduce Raquel. She just started a few months ago, got us through the audit, and has been doing a terrific job. Quick background. So CHAR was taken public through a shell called Tech Capital. The Cleantech Capital platform was started literally 10 years ago. Me and 6 other guys, we thought we could take 5 companies public in 5 years, and I committed $1 million, 200,000 times 5 to do that. Boy, was I wrong. I'm about $500,000 invested in Cleantech 1, $500,000 in Cleantech 2, and $500,000 in Cleantech 3, which is not trading as of today. I'll get to that in a moment. So it's taken a lot longer, but our success has been much bigger than we ever expected. CHAR was a 10-cent IPO. Our qualifying transaction was at 17 cents. We did financings at 21, 25, 32, 45, and most recently, we brought in our biggest shareholder, single biggest shareholder, ArcelorMittal, which is the world's largest steelmaker, and Irina is going to be speaking shortly, and they are now our largest shareholder, and that investment was at 60 cents. We'll talk later about our share price and how the business is doing, but all in all, it has worked out way better than ever expected, but it's taken 10 years, not 1. I thought 5 in 5 years. This turned out to be 3 in 10. David Butel, I'd like to introduce you. Where is David? He's at the back waving. Cleantech 3 is in the maple syrup business. Doesn't sound like Cleantech, but there's definitely an environmental angle to maple syrup. It's organic, it's vegan, it's kosher and halal, and it's got great sustainability angle. And the Butels, who are very dear friends and co-investors of our group, and Eric was one of our founding directors of the Cleantech Capital platform, they needed a change in control, so we decided to take a maple syrup company public, and that's what we're doing. There are samples. If you participated in the financing, take a couple. If you didn't, take 1. We had hoped to be closed by now. We are very rigorously working towards April 15th to close that transaction and to be trading before the end of April. So the one other person I'd like to introduce is Derek Webb. We refer to it as Cleantech 1. Where's Derek? Derek's in the corner. BioRim was taken public by a CPC, which was not our CPC, but it was the genesis. It was the reason we started the platform. I'm now the largest shareholder in BioRim. Bill White, our chairman, is the chairman of BioRim, and Derek's been a great partner, and BioRim has been an important, actually, they were a provider of services and things to CHAR. So BioRim, CHAR, and Turkey Hill, our maple syrup business, are the 3 companies that cleantech capital platform has evolved and developed. We do intend to do 2 more, but it's not going to be within the 10 years because that's up. But it'll probably be 5 in 15 years. And I'm excited about that, and we look forward to that future. Without further ado, I'm going to call up Bill White to go through our formal business. We'll just go through the agenda quickly. Welcome and introductions. We will have the official business. We'll have Irina as a guest speaker. We'll have Andrew do the CHAR Tech update, and then we're going to have Nik give the State of the Union. I apologize in advance. Irina unfortunately couldn't make it here, so her presentation will be digital or online. Nik is here in person, of course. So we have a combination. I guess the term is hybrid model. So, Bill, sorry, there is one slide that I need to speak to because we don't want to, it'll save Andrew doing it later. I love the forward-looking statement slide. Who's familiar with this slide? Anybody? How often does it get spoken to? Ever? I love speaking to it. I said it already. I'm $500,000 invested in CHAR. My mother, my brother, and all 3 of my sisters are investors in CHAR. My mom's 88 years old. She hasn't sold a share. When we traded above $1, I called my mom and said, "Hey, Mom, it's over $1. Do you want to sell some?" She said, "Why?" I believe in the story. And I said, "Well, she at the time, I think, was 86. I said, "You're 86 years old." I said, "My mom lived to 94. I got time, and I believe in the story. I'm not a seller." So my mom still owns all of her shares. My nephews and nieces, my cousins, my family is invested, and so am I. Andrew has never sold a share. The only time I've sold shares was to get new people involved. I sold shares, and he deserves a shout out. Chris Wardle's not in the room, but he's the broker at Lee Jones Gable. Of the $11 million that we raised over an 18-month period, he represented $8 million of it. And to get him involved, I agreed to sell him some stock, and I asked a few others in the room and some other strategic people, would you mind selling 5% or 10% so we could get other people involved? So we've been strategic about getting people involved, and I've been a seller only 3 times to get people involved. So I love the forward-looking statement. I'm proud of the fact that I've invested in this business. I participated in every round, and I bought stock at 60 cents in August. I think it's worth mentioning. Anyway, with that in mind, Bill, we'll go back to the formal business, and the podium's yours. And this will be a little bit painful. Feel free to look at your phones. And it reminds me, I forgot, the first thing I usually say is, there is a $10 penalty if your cell phone goes off, if it rings during this meeting at all. It goes to the Andrew White Travel Fund. We pay him okay, but not great. So turn up the volume on your phone if you can afford it. We'd love to have a few $10 bills for Andrew and his travel fund. But this will be painful. So feel free to check your email.
So as James has implied, he's very, very accurate in this. And I apologize for the formality of this and that you have to read every word that's written down because it's a regulatory document. But I'll try to get through it quickly and hopefully not as painful as James is saying. So with that, we'll begin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William White, Chairman of the corporation. I would like to welcome you to the 2024 Annual Special Meeting of Shareholders of CHAR Technologies Limited. I will act as chair of this meeting. As stated in the Management Information Circular, we are pleased to be able to resume holding unrestricted in-person shareholders meetings in addition to the live teleconference that's been made available for shareholders who do not wish to attend in person. So the meeting will now come to order. And with your approval, I will ask Andrew Todd to act as the secretary of the meeting and Amy Cam of TSX Trust Company to act as scrutineer. I now instruct the secretary to table the meeting the following documents: the notice of the meeting, the instrument of proxy, the Management Information Circular dated March 5th, 2024, and the audited financial statements and management's discussion and analysis of the corporation for the fiscal year ending 30th of 2023. I also confirm that the above material was sent to each director and the corporation's auditors. These documents are tabled in order that any shareholder may examine same if so desired. In view of the fact that the notice of meeting and statutory declaration proving service in accordance with the relevant bylaws of the corporation have been tabled and are available for inspection, I will now entertain a motion that the reading of the notice of meeting and the statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with.
I move that the reading of the notice of meeting and the statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with. Nik Nanos, I second.
It has now been moved and seconded that the reading of the notice of meeting and the statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any contrary? Motion's carried. Would the scrutineer please report the number of shareholders present in person and the total number of shares they represent, together with the number of shares represented by proxy? So there was a quorum present and proof of notice calling this meeting has been given in accordance with the corporation's bylaws and the Business Corporations Act of Ontario. I now declare that the meeting is regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business and instruct the secretary to make the declaration of mailing and attached exhibit as Schedule A of the minutes of the meeting. I now present to the meeting the consolidated statements of financial position and related financial statements of the corporation as at September 30th, 2023, together with the report thereon of the auditors of the corporation to the shareholders. Copies of such documents have been mailed to all shareholders, and it is not proposed to read them in the meeting unless anyone objects. I will now ask that someone move and someone second a resolution that the auditor's report be taken as read.
I would like to move that the auditor's report of the financial statements of the corporation for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2023 be taken as read. Nik Nanos, I second.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any contrary? I declare the resolution carried. It is now in order to proceed with the election of directors for the ensuing year. Accordingly, 6 directors are to be elected, and I declare the meeting open for nominations.
I nominate the following persons as directors of the corporation for the ensuing year: William White, James Sproula, Nik Nanos, Hugh Cleland, Anton Spitalak, and Irina Gorbounova.
The nominees named are nominees of the management as disclosed in a circular. Are there any further nominations? Would someone move that the nominations be closed?
I move that the nominations be closed. Nik, second.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Carried unanimously. I hereby declare the nominations closed. Would someone move, therefore, a resolution for the election of those persons nominated as directors?
I move that William White, James Sproula, Nik Nanos, Hugh Cleland, Anton Spitalak, and Irina Gorbounova be elected and hereby elected as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual meeting or until their successors are elected or appointed. I second.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Motion's carried unanimously. Hereby declare those persons duly elected as the directors of the corporation. The next item of business is a resolution appointing auditors for the ensuing year and authorizing the directors to fix their remuneration. As noted in the circular, MNP LLP were appointed by the board as auditors for the corporation on August 10th, 2023. Would someone move, therefore, the appointment of MNP LLP as the auditors of the corporation for the ensuing year and to authorize their directors to fix the remuneration?
I move that MNP LLP be appointed as auditors of the corporation for the ensuing year to serve at such remuneration as may be fixed by the board of directors.
Seconded.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any contrary? Carried unanimously. I declare that MNP LLP are appointed the auditors of the corporation for the ensuing year or until their successors are appointed to serve at such remuneration as may be fixed by the board of directors. The next item of business to consider is the related omnibus plan, and if deemed advisable to pass an ordinary resolution to. Okay. I broke something just standing here. And if deemed advisable to pass an ordinary resolution to reapprove the corporation's amended and restated omnibus long-term incentive plan as amended from time to time, the AR omnibus plan, as detailed on pages 22 to 28 of the circular. Are there any questions from the shareholders relating to this resolution? Good. In order for this resolution to be effective, it must be passed by a majority of the votes cast at this meeting, excluding the votes of insiders and their associates as described in the circular. If there are no questions, I would request a motion to approve of the A&R omnibus plan.
Be it resolved as an ordinary resolution that the amended and restated omnibus long-term incentive plan of CHAR Technologies Limited, the corporation, the A&R omnibus plan is hereby reapproved. The reservation for issuance from Treasury pursuant to options under the A&R omnibus plan and under any other security-based compensation arrangements adopted by the corporation of up to 10% of the issued and outstanding common shares of the corporation from time to time is hereby ratified, confirmed, and approved. The reservation for issuance from Treasury under the A&R omnibus plan pursuant to share appreciation rights, restricted share units, and deferred share units of 4,150,158 common shares is hereby ratified, confirmed, and approved. And finally, for you all, anyone or more director or officer of the corporation is authorized and directed on behalf of the corporation to take all necessary steps and proceedings and to execute, deliver, and file any and all declarations, agreements, documents, and other instruments, and do all such other acts and things, whether under corporate seal of the corporation or otherwise, that may be necessary or desirable to give effect to this ordinary resolution.
I second.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Contrary? Carried unanimously. I hereby declare that the ordinary resolution to approve the corporation's A&R omnibus plan has been passed by a majority of votes cast by the disinterested shareholders at this meeting. Unless there is any further business to come before the meeting, I would entertain a motion to terminate the meeting.
I move that this meeting be terminated.
Second.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Carried unanimously. I thank you for your attendance, and I hereby declare this meeting terminated.
Let's have a round of applause for Bill. Great job, Bill. Anton is from Australia, and that's why we gave him the big speaking parts from the audience to try and make it a little more entertaining. And I like how Nik was Nik Nanos and then just at the end, just the motion. So it's all good. I missed two things in my introduction. So before I introduce Irina, first of all, Scott Rubin, we'd like you to stand up and be recognized. He's come all the way from Thunder Bay, and he represents our partnership up in the north where we're getting wood from. So let's have a round for Scott. And last, our very important former CHAR executive who's still very involved, still a big shareholder, Dimitri Stoubos, came for this AGM all the way from Greece. He lives in Athens now. He's the Chief Administrative Officer of Cleantech Capital, and he's a very important and dear friend. So, Dimitri, thank you for being here. So it's my pleasure to introduce Irina. It's my pleasure to introduce Irina. As I mentioned in the opening, ArcelorMittal is now our single largest shareholder. They invested millions of dollars, but more importantly, we have a contract with them, an offtake agreement at Dofasco in Hamilton, which is very important to the company. And we look forward very much to an ongoing building relationship with them. Irina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone, and apologies, I cannot be I hope you can hear me okay.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. It's afternoon in London. Apologies, I can't be there in person, but I'm delighted to be able to present to you virtually. I can't hear myself. I think I can. I hope you guys can hear me. But so indeed, we are really pleased to be a shareholder in CHAR, and it was in. Okay, I'm getting a message that you can hear me clearly. That's great. So I'm really pleased to see so much passion around CHAR business, which obviously we share. Before I speak about why we invested in CHAR, I'm also very passionate about steel. And I always talk about credentials of steel. And yesterday we had a discussion with our team around the future, how the future is going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And of course, none of us has a crystal ball, but there are a couple of trends which are undeniable that are shaping the way our world is going to look like. And some of them, I'll name 3, are the growing population. I think the world is growing, and we know that. And the second one is climate change. And the third one is AI and exponential growth of AI. And if you take those three trends, the growing population, we will need so much more of low carbon infrastructure, housing. If you take climate change, just anything related to energy transition, solar panels, wind towers, nuclear engines, just name it, electrical vehicles, you need a lot of steel. And if you look at AI and exponential growth of AI, all of those data centers need so much steel. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, steel is so fundamental for the energy transition. And regardless of how the future is going to look like, there is so much steel that's going to be required in the future. As you might know, currently there is close to 2 billion tons of steel produced globally. This number is set to grow to anywhere between 2.2 to 2.5 billion tons, according to various estimates by 2050. So there is a lot of steel, regardless of the number, there is a lot of steel to decarbonize. And steel is also infinitely recyclable. So again, it's one of the most sustainable materials and very fundamental to the energy transition and the future of our world. And we as a leading company, we are trying to ensure we produce steel in the most sustainable way. Because the challenge with the current steel production is that most of the steel is produced through blast furnace operations, which result in a very high carbon footprint because of the usage of the fossil coal. So that's one of the reasons, of course, we are trying to decarbonize our operations. We have established a number of technology pathways to produce steel in the most low carbon and zero carbon manner. One of them is DRI based on hydrogen. DRI stands for direct reduced iron. So if we produce DRI, if we use DRI modules and hydrogen, we can produce steel at a very low carbon manner. The challenge there is, of course, the availability of hydrogen infrastructure. That's the reason the second pathway that we are really focused on is what we call smart carbon. And smart carbon is about using existing operations, but finding a way to replace fossil coal with biocarbon, with biocoal, and then use and leverage CCUS to really reduce our carbon emissions to the extent we can. There is another way also, which is direct electrolysis. So you can use direct electricity to decarbonize, you can use direct electricity to produce liquid steel from iron ore, but this is still not at the technological maturity to produce steel at the industrial scale. Nevertheless, we are working on all of those pathways, and I think you can clearly see how CHAR fits the picture. That's definitely our smart carbon pathway to produce steel. In addition to all of those technology pathways, we decided to launch XCarb Innovation Fund. You would ask why? Because we seem to have figured it all out. But I think the objective was to really tap into innovative ecosystem outside of our group. While we have a lot of talented research and development and technology teams within the company working on fantastic initiatives, I think we really wanted to ensure we leave the stone unturned and also see if we can identify some of the most promising and some of the most bright entrepreneurs out there working on some of those solutions so that we can really accelerate our net zero journey. So that was the reason behind the fund. So 3 years ago, it was March 2021, we have launched XCarb Innovation Fund with the objective to identify some of those technologies, to invest in them and see how we can potentially deploy or work with those companies again in our net zero efforts. As we launched the funds, we actually got at some point bombarded by various opportunities. So what we did, we decided to take a step back and said, instead of reacting to every opportunity we get, how about we take a step back and see what exactly are we after? So we have identified a number of technology domains and launched an XCarb accelerator program back in, if I'm not mistaken, 2022, calling for entrepreneurs around the globe to apply. And we were incredibly pleased to get a lot of applications. I believe within a couple of weeks, we have received more than 200 applications. And, it was really an immense response. And following which, of course, we tried to shortlist the most promising companies and the most promising technologies that stood out for us in support of our decarbonization efforts. And of course, where I'm heading with that. I'm quite pleased to say that CHAR was the winner of our accelerator, and we're really pleased to be the investor and the supporter of the company. We were really impressed by the management team. I think all of our teams expressed a lot of appreciation and gratitude for interaction with the team. And the reason CHAR stood out is also because of two products, both biocoal and syngas and renewable natural gas. And of course, there are a number of companies out there that are trying now to come up with the solutions. But I'm really happy that we're also with our Canadian operations, our operations in the Fasco. I believe there was already collaboration for a number of years where our business told us that actually CHAR solution, CHAR product really provides the solution for us replacing the portion of coke and coal in our operations. Because we can in principle replace fossil coal both in blast furnace and also by injecting it into the electric arc furnace. So there are a number of routes how we can use CHAR product in our operations to reduce our carbon emissions. And I think with the Fasco, we now have an agreement for the offtake of close to 30,000 tons, if I'm not mistaken, which will lead to the reduction of just below 100,000 tons of CO2. So that's, of course, quite significant. And with that comes both the reduction in the carbon emissions, but also financial benefits. I know also that now, just before this call, we were discussing with our team, I believe there are some initial negotiations ongoing also with our operations in Brazil and also our operations in Europe. It's still at the initial stages, but I'm quite pleased to see that, we can potentially use CHAR product outside of Canada as well. So I think that's really great. And I think with this, I will conclude my speech. Again, apologies I couldn't make it in person, but I'm very pleased to be speaking to you.
Thank you, Irina. I hope you can hear the applause. I think it was very engaging, although it was online, but hopefully next year you'll be able to appear in person.
I hope so.
You can be a guest speaker twice in a row if it's in person next time. How does that sound?
I'll take it.
Okay, thanks again. But before I introduce Andrew, I just want to reiterate how happy we are to have the great partnerships with ArcelorMittal, with our northern communities, with a ton of other stakeholders. And this is the way we've built what we've built so far, and we will continue to build through partnership. So thanks again, Irina. Andrew, the podium's yours. We will have Q&A with Andrew at the end of the presentation.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see we're kind of standing room only. I was thinking as I was making my way through the room, it kind of reminded me of my wedding a year and a half ago. You want to get around and say hi to everybody. And by the time you've spoken to a third of the people, it's time to go, time to do something. So we are sticking around after the presentation. So please come say hi if I didn't get a chance in trying to make it through the room earlier. I've already seen a bunch of people at the back who must have snuck in while I was sitting here. So welcome everyone. So it's always nice to come back to what we do as a reminder for those who are either new to the story or, are maybe invested in one or two other companies and want to have a reminder of what CHAR does. This is the basics of what we do. So this is how high temperature pyrolysis works. So in that kind of green rectangle, you see biosolids, wood waste and residuals, agricultural waste. Those go into our high temperature pyrolysis process. The key elements here, high temperature, 850, 900 degrees Celsius. Pyrolysis means without oxygen. So there's no air or oxygen in the system. And what we're doing is we're cracking those feedstocks apart. So we're cracking them into kind of some of their fundamental elements. As Irina was saying, one of those is a bio coal, so we can further upgrade that carbon output and create drop-in replacements for steelmaking. The other's on the gas side, so that gas starts as syngas, and we can convert it into things like renewable natural gas or green hydrogen. Our focus in this space is all on industrial decarbonization. So you can see most of our end users primarily are in that industrial space. The municipality kind of relates to the biosolids, which I'll mention in a little bit. So our expansion process, and as we get towards the end of the presentation, you'll see where we're building out the project and the processes, but it's really around this wood waste to renewable energy products. So when we look at our process, we approach it from a modularity perspective. So what I'm showing here on this slide here is the one module. So what does one module of our system do? It takes about 38,000 tons per year of wood waste. To put that number in context, Kirkland Lake Power, when it was still running a biomass-fired power plant in Kirkland Lake, was taking about 350,000 tons. So to give you a sense of scale, one power plant versus sort of one of our modules. We heat the system up, so it's a closed-loop carbon negative process. Like I said, the materials don't burn, and then we create our two output products. So our focus is both the biocoal with great partnerships with Arcelor, and of course, renewable natural gas. That sort of underpins a lot of the financial benefits of the project, and the ability to get project financing is long-term renewable natural gas or green hydrogen offtake opportunities. The important thing about renewable natural gas is that it is completely interchangeable with fossil gas. So as far as any consumer is concerned, that gas is the same thing, except it's come from renewable sources. And so I borrowed this slide from Enbridge because it's a really good example. Across the board in decarbonization, it takes a number of different solutions. So in Irina's presentation on the focus on steel, there's a number of different pathways that are needed to totally decarbonize steelmaking. Similarly, when we look at it more generally, when we look at industrial, building, transportation, there's a number of different sources that really all have to come together. And one of those is the renewable natural gas. And again, our focus on that piece is industrial. A lot of people are probably not necessarily aware in Ontario, about 80% of gas use is in industrial processes that are not easy to electrify. So it's that 80% that we're after, and how do we reduce the fossil gas consumption and replace it with natural gas for the time being. And because governments recognize this and utilities recognize this, we can enter into fairly long-term offtake agreements for this renewable gas. So you can see here the first bullet, whether it's Énergir in Quebec or Fortis BC or pricing down in California under the low carbon fuel standard, we can see pricing between $21 and $45 under long-term dollars per gigajoule. Under short-term, those could be 60, 65 or higher. To be clear, we're going for the long-term offtake agreements to really de-risk the projects. To put those numbers in context, sort of at home, delivered to your house, you're probably paying about $8 to $12, depending on the price of natural gas, where you live, what your delivery costs are, and all of that. So that, I think, really highlights the premium that is being put on renewable natural gas today, in that the pricing is in that $40 to $45 range for the producer, but a homeowner is paying $8 to $10. So that's the gap, and that's why we see this as such a great opportunity. So our Thorold facility will be 2 modules. So previous slide, I showed 1 module gives you 250,000 gigajoules, 2 modules, double that, 500. And the pipeline that I'll talk about, we have a pipeline of about 3 million gigajoules that we're planning to roll out in the short term here. The other opportunity for not just renewable natural gas, but renewable natural gas made from biomass is the availability. So this is from a study done by WSP and Deloitte. It's looking at the ability to produce renewable natural gas technically and economically in the province of Quebec. So in 2018, most renewable natural gas, all renewable natural gas, came from organic waste in some way, shape, or form. So that could be farm-based, so manure or crop residues or the like, going into what's called an anaerobic digester. This little bar, residual agri-food, that's like your green bin organic waste. And then engineered landfill sites. So that's a landfill. It's been covered. You drill some wells into the landfill and you collect the methane from the organic waste. So in all these cases, it's organic waste decomposing. And the number here for 2018 estimate was 25 million gigajoules. When we look at the capacity, when we include woody biomass, which is CHAR's technology, it goes from 25 to 144. And this is all with material that is already available. So processing residuals are things like wood chips and sawdust that come out of a sawmill. It's crucial for a sawmill to be able to sell this material. They basically break even on the lumber products, and then they're either going to sink or swim based on how they monetize the residuals. So that's a really important factor. In Ontario, particularly where we see pulp mills shutting down, there's more of this material that needs to find an economically good home. Harvesting residuals are things like tree tops and tree limbs, things that are created when the trees are harvested. And then non-merchantable wood is that wood that is either low demand or it's got a weird kink in it or a knot or it can't be used for any number of reasons. So this is all available materials. So we're not creating new harvesting requirements. We're not going into the forest and clear cutting trees to make energy. This is all residuals from existing forestry operations. So I don't need to spend too much time on the Arcelor side because I think Irina did a great job, but I do like to pull this slide from their climate action report. So you can see there's a number of the technologies that Irina mentioned. Sort of in the center bottom is that DRI, direct reduced iron, and EAF, electric arc furnace. You can see there's a pathway of using hydrogen to run the EAF. There's carbon capture opportunities. There's a number of different pathways, but sort of top dead center is pyrolysis and using either this circular carbon or this smart carbon as a way to replace fossil carbon with some of these biocoals. And so this is one of the primary reasons that Arcelor did come to the table with their investment, with the offtake agreements, and really building on what was an emerging and continuing partnership that started with the group in DeFasco and Global R&D and has really spread in terms of opportunities to help really make meaningful impact in decarbonizing steelmaking. Another really interesting one, and I wanted to add this slide for the AGM because the questions still tend to come, even though we're not going out and harvesting trees for energy, we're using the residuals. Well, shouldn't those residuals stay in the forest? Aren't they an important part of the, ecosystem and to help forest regenerate? And the answer is some of it, but if you leave all of it, you're creating a lot of fuel that can sit there, dry out, and cause pretty significant emissions. So last year, everyone's aware there was a pretty significant fire season here in Ontario and Quebec and in BC. And when you include the emissions from forest fires, and remember, when a forest burns, that carbon's been captured for 20 to 50 years or even longer. So it's all being released at once. So it is causing a greenhouse gas effect. And if you include the CO2 emissions from those forest fires, Canada's emissions are 83% of the entirety of the European Union last year with all the forest fires. So this is the kind of impact that forest fires can have and why it's very important to be focused on proper forest management and the ability to use residuals instead of leaving them as fuel in the forest and using them for decarbonization opportunities. So this status comparing two fairly similar forest countries. So particularly in Eastern Canada, our forests are relatively similar to that of Sweden, but our wildfire rate is 50 times that of Sweden's. When you include forest fires, our per capita GHG emissions are 68, Sweden's is 0.7. So it's not that it can't be done or that we don't have the ability to manage this. It's that, you know, Sweden's sustainable harvest rate is about 7 times that of Canada. They're required to use residuals in more meaningful and thoughtful ways. And that's one of the reasons that we see these wildfire rates being so dramatically different, even though the forest type is pretty similar. Over the last year, we've done, I think, a very excellent job at bringing in non-dilutive government funding. So some of this is through grants and some of this is through loan programs. But importantly, it's because we're helping support forestry, both in things like how do we use more of this biomass that is waste and residual to reduce forest fires? How do we help support forestry harvesting and some of those mills, especially when large pulp mills are closing down and sawmills need homes for those residuals? How are we creating jobs in some of these communities? You know, Scott, as James mentioned, is here because we've created this great partnership with his organization, Lake Nipigon Forest Management, Inc., which is a cooperative of 4 First Nations that control about 1 million hectares of forest in the Lake Nipigon area. 1 million hectares of forest didn't really mean a whole lot to me until we started to do a tour, and we were sort of like 4 hours into the helicopter tour, and I think we saw like 1/3 of the forest. And then Scott reminded me, Nova Scotia is 4 or 5 million hectares. Lake Nipigon Forest is 1 million. So it's a big block of land, and the ability to help and partner to be able to use that biomass is great. So when you look at the funding programs, you know, Fuels Fund, that's a non-dilutive, non-repayable grant to support feed studies for 5 of our projects, which I'll lay out in the map. IFIT is a provincial program, so that is a non-repayable grant. Sorry, that's federal. That's a non-payable grant to support our build out of Thorold. FSIP, the next one, is a provincial program, again, supporting our build out of Thorold, partially forgivable loan and partially repayable, and then FedDev also for supporting Thorold. So the reason that we're very successful in this area is because we're touching on a lot of key topics that run across the political spectrum. It doesn't matter sort of which government's in power. You know, if we look at the Liberals federally and the Progressive Conservatives provincially, you know, we are still meeting requirements and mandates and programs because we're decarbonizing heavy industry and we're creating jobs in a lot of areas that are seeing job loss because of a whole number of factors. So as I mentioned, one of the other things that we successfully did this year, which we're very proud of, is securing this partnership with Lake Nipigon Forest Management, Inc. So this picture is of us in the tent signing our general partnership agreement for the operating entity. The picture on your right, which shows a tent in a field. So this is all the work that LNFMI has already done in terms of clearing the site, leveling the site. You know, they're a fantastic partner because they're ready to go and we're providing the technology. But when they see something they like and they want to move, they move quickly. And what else can we ask for in a partner? So it's fantastic. We're up there. The intention is to start with 2 kiln units. So that's, again, producing that 500,000 gigajoules a year of RNG. But with the amount of forestry residuals and biomass available, you know, it's fairly easy to see where 500,000 tons per year of wood residuals can come from. One of our modules does 37,500 tons. So there's a lot of biomass up there for us to continue to expand, to produce this renewable natural gas and really feed the needs of our great partners at ArcelorMittal throughout Canada from this project. So we have 2 active projects. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about Thorold. That one is our build, own, operate one down in Thorold, Ontario, Niagara region, right beside Welland. And then the other is Synagro, so that's with a project. So we're delivering a system to Synagro. Their interest is in the destruction of PFAS. So this is still a business area. I've mentioned it in previous AGMs. So this is an area we're making progress in. When this plant is operating, it'll be processing some dried biosolids and demonstrating the ability to destroy PFAS, per polyfluorinated alkyl substance. It's that forever chemical. It's in Teflon and Gore-Tex and all sorts of great non-stick products that, you know, just have this side effect of forever chemicals that aren't so great for us. Thorold is coming along nicely, so I'll talk a little bit more about that one. So this is where Thorold is, just as a intro for those of you who haven't seen where it is. So the image on the left, it's pointing to where our facility is. It's right on the Welland Canal. We have rail right behind our building, and we're close to highway, so we can bring in or move material by boat, by rail, by truck, which is fantastic. And you can see we're in fairly close proximity to ArcelorMittal Dofasco, so the steel mill in Hamilton. So this is what the plant looks like. This is, for those in the biomass space, sort of an interesting slide always, because everything outside that building, so everything in front, is all about handling biomass. That takes up the most space. That takes a lot of proper engineering to make sure it's done right. Our technology are those two kiln units that are inside the building, which is, you know, a little bit de-emphasized here based on the view, but really, really important part of the technology. But if we don't handle that biomass, we're not going to be running it through the kiln. So it's a really important piece of the overall project, and great that I saw Paul Khalil here somewhere. I don't see him right now. There he is. Paul is from Biomass Engineering, so they're helping us with that front end. So we're starting to get major equipment deliveries towards the end of this month and into next month. We've got our project finance package for the entire project in front of those potential project financiers for the entirety of the project. So as a reminder, as we've talked about with various people, with the government funding and the funding from Arcelor, we are looking to roll out one process train, making the biocoal, as we bring the rest of the financing packages together for the entirety of the plant. The other question I get a lot, so I wanted to touch on it, is how do these projects actually work, and how much revenue and then profit goes back to, say, CHAR Technologies or our partners. So I thought it important to just kind of take that back for everyone and kind of explain how a project co works versus sort of the public company, which is CHAR Technologies. So at the top here, we have the project limited partnership. It generates revenue. That revenue then gets used to pay typical OpEx. So, you know, the operating of the plant, the biomass, CHAR Tech, depending on the project, will get a management fee to help support the operations of the plant. For certain products in certain jurisdictions, if we don't have it all under long-term contract, you know, some marketing fees to help support selling those projects. If we're doing typical project finance, where we're getting a component of debt, you have your tax account and you pay your lenders back. And then you have some reserves, so a reserve for major maintenance, operations and maintenance, debt reserves. And then what's left gets distributed to the unit holders. So if we use the Lake Nipigon Forest Management Inc. partnership as an example, Lake Nipigon Forest Sustainable Energy Solutions LP sort of estimates, when we look at the balance of equity versus debt and grants, you know, the investment from the partners from an equity perspective are going to be around the $1 million range. That project will generate 20 million a year in revenue from the biocoal and the renewable natural gas. Once we've after operations, you know, we've got an EBITDA on the plan of about 8 million. We then, you know, because we're planning to take in debt, we have to pay some debt and some reserves. So we're left with about 5 million, and this will vary depending on how much debt we take and a number of factors. So this is just an illustrative example, but we'll be in this ballpark. And so the LP unit holders then get that distribution. So in this particular project, annually CHAR would get a distribution of about $2.5 million, and LNFMI unit holders would similarly get that amount. Of course, during the construction build engineering, CHAR's involved in that and will be generating cash flow for the company. And we'll be mindful of our disclosures in that we're not going to be claiming 100% revenue to build a project that we partially own. So not to worry, we've got that figured out, but we will be getting good cash flows to keep the development cycle going. So we look at our scaling up plan, and instead of just looking at it from an output perspective, looking at it from a what are the potential annual distributions from these projects to the LP unit holders. And this is assuming that 70% debt perspective. So since last year, we've moved Thorold from in development to in construction, which is a great progress. And then you can see they're all roughly the same size, 2 modules making renewable natural gas and biocoal. The ones in development, Lake Nipigon, of course, Kirkland Lake and St. Félicien. And then with the clean fuels funding, the next projects in line are in Terrace, Drayton Valley, and La Sarre. So those are funded to do the feasibility studies. And as we bring all of those projects to operation, we'd be looking at about 32 to 33 million in LP distributions to the unit holders. So those projects where we're in partnership, that would be split. Those projects where we're doing it ourselves, it would be that amount. But I hope that gives a better sense of the opportunity here to generate some pretty strong cash flows from the projects on an ongoing basis, based on relatively quick payback times for that equity investment by CHAR into the project. So with that, that's what we've done this year. Maybe I won't put your face up yet, Nick. That's a highlight of what we've done this year. I'm happy to sort of answer some questions. I wanted to keep it relatively high level to give a good sense of what we're doing, what we've done since last year's AGM, and what we're planning to do next year. Thank you.
Hello. Good. Because we've got people online, if you have questions, we'd like you to use the microphone so that people can hear it in other places. Questions? Don't all jump up at once.
I saw Bob taking lots of notes, so these are going to be great questions.
Hi, Bob McWhirter. Just on the overall project, the $5 million of equity, what would be to the total CapEx? So I can get a vague idea as to what the debt might be in the combination to make the whole project go.
Yeah, so we use sort of a rough estimate of between 50 and 60, depending greenfields, brownfields, utilities accessible, what we have to bring in, but that's a good ballpark.
So $50 million in total.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other one was your deal with Synagro. You suggested that the initial operations would start in summer of 2024. Is this a pilot plant or a full-blown commercial? And please give us an idea as to what kind of volumes and what it all means into potential cash into your jeans.
For sure. So this is with Synagro, it's a pilot project. We're quite excited about it because there's not a lot of pyrolysis of biosolids that are permitted in the United States. So the fact that this is a US-based project will really open the door both for deployment of commercial scale units as well as creating that pathway for much easier permitting for projects 2+. We'll be processing about 900 pounds an hour of biosolids. So it's really demonstrating how much usable syngas is produced. So that syngas will be destined for running not only the kiln, but also dryers in future commercial operations. And importantly, measuring the PFAS destruction as the plant's running. We've done PFAS testing in our demonstration plant with some Canadian-based biosolids and done all the testing and proven it, but often in these spaces, it's a bit of a number of scale-up approaches. We've been working with Synagro for quite a number of years as we continue to develop it. But with this one in place, the challenge that Synagro has is their general business model is they co-locate with a municipality. They take the wet sewage sludge, they dry it and pelletize it, and then they get a service fee for doing so. But then they sell that finished product as an agricultural soil amendment type of product. So they get a revenue stream. With PFAS, that model switches, and now they're having to pay pretty substantial amounts to landfills to take the product. So there is a strong impetus to see this demonstration plant run ASAP to get that final validation to, ideally start really rolling it out within the existing fleet. We don't have intentions of looking to sell directly to municipalities. That takes a extensively long time, as some of my colleagues here know and kind of convinced me of through the years. So we'll be continuing to look to work through partners like Synagro for these deployments.
And would this be a partnership with equity participation, or just more you're selling a piece of equipment?
Yeah, this would be more the equipment sale opportunity. Our ongoing equity participation is still very much focused in woody biomass of various sorts into biocoals and syngas, RNG, green hydrogen.
And just so people know, the U.S. Effectively has said, EPA, you can not have, the break point is less than 2 parts per billion as far as what's allowable for PFAS. So it's a very nasty chemical, and the actual ability to end up getting rid of it is really important. Thanks.
Absolutely. And this is one of the solutions to do so on the solids. Kind of 2 ppb, look at a swimming pool and you're like a couple of grains of rice in that pool, to put it in visual context. So it's a very, very small amount that's allowable. And that's why there's a great opportunity in the, delivery of equipment to clients in that space.
Next question.
I'm just curious around carbon offsets. Are there any being generated for either CHAR or Dofasco?
So carbon offsets and carbon credits and the like, it's kind of an indirect, but we do monetize it. And by that, I mean, when you sell renewable natural gas, for example, your long-term contract to the gas utilities, you assign all the environmental attributes, which is the credits associated with that gas. So we're not ourselves generating a credit that we're trading, but that's one of the reasons we see that big premium. Similarly, for the bio-coal space, you can look at, if you burn 1 ton of coal, you create 3 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. That is priced at, in 2030, $170 a ton. And so do we participate in some of the cost savings versus coal and carbon tax? For sure. But we don't, in either case, generate marketable credits.
We have time for one more question or 2 brief questions.
Hey, Andrew, thanks. That was great. I'm Connie from Environment Journal. I'm just wondering about the project pipeline. So Thorold's in construction. How long do you think for the others in development and feasibility to reach construction and even completion?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's kind of 2 parts of it. One is a lot of these projects we're planning to roll out by producing biocoal while the rest of the project is being built. So from a biocoal perspective, certainly Lake Nipigon and Kirkland Lake and St. Félicien are potentials to start producing the carbon by next summer. And then the gas would kind of follow on another 12 months after. The gas piece, there's more sort of permitting, there's engineering work, the need to tie into pipelines and all of that stuff. So it just takes a little bit longer. And so we're going to deploy it in that kind of 2-phased approach to get some production out quickly and then get the gas piece on as quickly as we can.
We have a question from our online audience. Swathi, can you read it?
Yep. The question is there an opportunity for direct pipeline injection of RNG produced at Lake Nipigon, similar to the Thorold project? This is from Brian Bobby.
Potential. So it's always important to keep options open as we're looking to deploy projects. So there is, through the property, a natural gas transmission line. Now, transmission's a little different than distribution. It's higher pressure, so there's some sort of negotiations that have to happen. If we can't go directly into the pipeline as we would like, we can move it by truck about 8 kilometers to a secondary injection station. So we do have a couple of options for the gas on that site.
Okay, I think we'll close off the questions there, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay.
Good job. Let's give Andrew a round of applause.
put that up in Nick's presentation if you want to introduce him.
Sorry, I'll introduce.
Yeah. Go ahead. I just have to open this.
Sure. Before I introduce Nick, there was no question about stock price, which I'm glad there wasn't because I don't really want Andrew answering questions like that. But I feel compelled to give you my 2 cents, and maybe it's worth more than 2 cents, maybe it's worth 0. But the reality is we have had a stock price that's had ups and downs. That's the reality. I talked during my opening presentation or my opening remarks of how we did a 10-cent IPO, 17-cent QT, 21, 25, 32, 45, and 60 cents. Our stock today, I looked while I was sitting during Bill's presentation, I had a moment while Nick was making a motion or seconding a motion, and we're trading at 44 cents today. I thought, well, actually, let me tell you what I know. I know that I don't know where our stock price is going next, but I firmly believe that the investment from Arcelor at 60 cents should have put a new floor on our stock price. It didn't. After that investment, I bought stock at 60 cents. I'm a believer, and so is my mother, my brother, and all 3 of my sisters, and lots of friends and family. I know in this room, we have lots of supporters and people that have been involved in the story for a long time. I don't know if we're going to 35 cents or 80 cents, but I hope from Andrew's presentation and from the support that we've had from the great group of people and the buy-in that we've had from our stakeholders and flying in from Thunder Bay, joining us virtually from England, we know we have great support from our partners, and I'm quite confident that there is a lot of upside in our stock. So with that in mind, we'll close off the CHAR part of the presentation, although feel free to ask Nick. It's my pleasure to introduce Nik Nanos. In 1987, I was 19 years old and I was a debater, and I went to my first novice tournament, and they're called dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are the people that have been debating for a long time, and Nick was a very prolific dinosaur. I would say he's aged really well because he looked the same back then as he looks today, pretty much. But no, I looked up to Nick as a debater, and I was, quite pleased and really happy that he was a seed capital investor in cleantech capital. And when we took CHAR public and did the qualifying transaction, he participated in the next round of financing, and he's been a huge supporter. A few years ago, when we wanted to turn over the board and start the next capital pool, I asked Nick if he'd be interested, and I believe we're his first public board. He's been the chancellor of a university. He's been on various different charitable boards. He's an honorary captain in the Canadian Navy, and he recently was appointed to the Order of Canada. So it is a great privilege. I'm proud to have Nik Nanos on our board of directors. He also became chair of the audit committee, which nobody wants to do. So that was pretty good too. Anyway, not as good as the Order of Canada, but up there. Anyway, without further ado, Nik Nanos.
Thanks, Jim. I was going to say for that kind introduction, but to refer to me as a dinosaur when you were 19, does that mean I'm extinct now? Because I'm not sure how that plays itself out. Well, it's great to join everyone here today, and it's also great to be part of, I'll call it the CHAR Yes tribe, right? That really believes in what's happening. And even setting aside my friendship with James, the reality is that when I look at all the different types of work that I do, I'm very fortunate to kind of be at the front or be at the cutting edge of what's probably going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And when James first described what was happening at CHAR and the opportunity, it was very clear to me that CHAR was in the right place at the right time. And fundamentally, we are at a moment in time right now where solutions like CHAR are going to be significant. They're going to be material. They're going to be important. And for a lot of Canadians, they probably have never heard of this process. But I would hazard to say probably in 10 years or so, it's going to be very well known, this process and this solution and the impact, the positive impact that it has. And, the interesting thing is, many times for those of you that might watch what's happening on social media or in the news and stuff like that, many times things seem quite polarized. But, the reality is that when we look at the research that we've done, is that people are actually agnostic. They're very practical. They're not polarized. What does that mean? I remember one time we were doing a research project for one of the major multinationals, and I was watching the focus group. And, you know, one of the things that was introduced in the focus group is like, how do you feel about solar technology and wind power and all that other kind of stuff? And you know, I remember listening to a woman who was, you know, responding and asked to respond how she felt. And she said, you know, why can't this just be like, you know, my retirement portfolio? I get worried when governments say that the future is one thing. And I'd like it to be like my retirement portfolio. You know, I would like to see solar. I would like to see, you know, wind. I would also, you know, there probably will be carbon to one extent or another. And, you know, I look at things and what she wants to see at least is a portfolio of solutions. And, you know, when I look at CHAR at least, it's, you know, that grain of truth and insight from that woman. CHAR is part of a portfolio of environmental solutions that is actually quite flexible and can be embedded and built into other processes that exist right now. And that's really how we have to look at it. The other thing is, and I don't know if there are any politicians in the room, but you know, the thing is people don't trust politicians to just find solutions, but they do trust technology, right? And you know, it'd be one of those things where whenever, for a lot of these environmental challenges that we have, you know, the first thing they say is, how can we put a person on the moon and then not be able to figure out how to decarbonize our economy? So, you know, the technology play within the environment is critical to Canadians, but also part of the heart of CHAR. But we also have to remember, and you know, Andrew talked about this in terms of the business model, is that we have to remember also that Canadians are cross-pressured. And when I say that they're cross-pressured, what I mean is that, you know, they want to fulfill their environmental aspirations because you know what? Everyone wants a clean economy, but they're cross-pressured in terms of the price of fighting climate change, and also the speed with which climate change is dealt with. And I think that's why when we're talking about the solution that CHAR represents, the technology and the potential, that it's really in, from my perspective at least, or as an observer, it's really in the right place at the right time. And, you know, we have to put another layer, the political layer right now, is that there's a lot of focus for average Canadians on carbon taxes. And I think carbon taxes, the environment, and how to decarbonize is going to be a key battleground, at least in the next federal election. But, you know, in work that we do with the University of Ottawa, you can see that Canadians over time are about 2 times more likely to want to be climate ambitious in terms of thinking that this is a good time to fight climate change. And, you know, this in a context where there are a significant number of Canadians that are just struggling to pay for the bills. And the other thing is that, you know, when we look at variations, that you can see that especially in Ontario and Quebec, that those are 2 markets at least where, at least from a geographic perspective and political perspective at least, that these are kind of 2 key areas where this whole idea of being climate ambitious, even in the face of costs that people know we will incur, is actually quite significant. And, you know, the thing is that, you know, when we look at this whole idea of concern about climate change in the economy, and whether this is a good time or not, that this is not a normal distribution curve, you know, which is basically a bell curve that, you know, a significant proportion of people score at a 10 out of 10. And, you know, I guess this is the extra juicy bit. This is our weekly tracking that we do. And I want to put this into context because politics is quite important. You know, what we can see at least now in the latest tracking that we do every week that you might see in different news organizations, the federal Conservatives still have an advantage and have been enjoying an advantage since last August. there's a bit of an interplay between the New Democrats and the Liberals. You can see that red trend line has been going up at least in the last 4 to 5 weeks, while the orange trend line has been going down. But, you know, the thing is that the key takeaway is that right now, at the heart of the debate between the Liberals and the Conservatives, a lot of it has to do with the carbon tax. And, you know, the reality is, and what's actually quite striking, is you probably noticed in the last while disagreements between provincial premiers and the federal government, but there's actually agreement that we need to decarbonize. So my point is that it really doesn't matter who wins the next election. They might disagree in terms of the strategy, but they both agree that we need to decarbonize and have a strategy and solutions that help decarbonize our economy. So, you know, you might think if one party gets in power, they might not like, you know, certain types of things. Well, the reality is the key, I think the key thing here for CHAR is that this has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with science and it has to do with technology. And it is agnostic. So, you know, regardless, from my perspective, at least as an observer, regardless of what happens in the next year or two, provincially or federally, the reality is that those governments are going to be pragmatic. Those governments are going to want to look at technology solutions, and they're going to want to be practical in terms of things that they can action. So what's the upshot? And this is my last slide. And we have to think of the intersection between the environment and the economy is going to continue to be a key driver. And I think this is where not only the environmental impact, the positive environmental impact and technology that CHAR represents, but also the business case that it is, that, you know, that is quite positive, is going to be critical. And you're going to have to think of consumers or voters wanting to find solutions for politicians to stop bickering about things and to talk about solutions and technology, because people are probably going to want to hear less about regulations as a solution and more about technology as a solution. And with that in mind, I think that's one of the reasons, among a number of reasons, why I've been very excited to serve on the board, James, even the audit committee, and why I think, you know, CHAR is very well positioned from a technological perspective. It's very well positioned in terms of future commercialization, and that it's in the right place at the right time. The fact that Arcelor has come to the table should not be diminished, because realistically, that is an international world-leading company that has basically validated that they believe what we believe, that there is a bright future for this technology and that it's in the right place at the right time. So with that, James, thanks you for inviting me to have a quick chat, and everybody have a great rest of the day. Yeah, I can do questions.
We have about 5 minutes, I believe, for Q&A. And before we do, though, I should tell you, Nick, we've never talked about it. Debating dinosaurs, which I became because I debated way longer than I should have, they don't turn into oil. They turn into activated carbon. And they're carbon neutral, too. So anyway, okay, with that in mind, questions? Arthur.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for the presentation. Arthur Potts, one-term MPP, no longer a politician.
Oh.
But I want to go back to that comment about, you know, the public generally want to see technology, but not regulatory solutions. I mean, let's be real. We'd still have lead and gas if it wasn't for regulation. We'd still have acid rain. And we're not going to go down the route of decarbonizing without strong regulatory incentives. So when you see these kinds of information from the public, it's a pocketbook issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe in decarbonizing, but don't let it cost me anything. I think the research shows that. So could you talk a little bit about what kind of regulation? I think you're right, you know, that all the governments will go down that route.
Yeah.
But, you know, the carbon tax has been really, really difficult.
Yeah, I think
politically.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think one of the challenges, and we know how cynical people are, is that when people see any government doing any kind of regulation, they figure there's some sort of dogma, ideology behind it. And the point that I'm trying to make is there's a difference between that and science, technology being agnostic. It's politically agnostic, you know, And I think that's why I say people are more likely to be excited and interested and have confidence in technology solutions. That said, governments have to provide a framework. But, you know, that framework, like last night, I was, I do a lot of work in Germany, and last night I was with I was having a little dinner with the president of Siemens Energy, World Energy, BAMAG, the CEO of BAMAG, the big German mining company. And you know, they were talking about, you know, the discussion was about what are the conditions that we need in Canada in order to promote more investment. And, you know, for them, it wasn't necessarily regulation, but regulatory cooperation. And, you know, this might be an issue that we might want to talk about at the CHAR board, because, you know, the president of BAMAG was talking about how, you know, he has mines, they have major mining interests across Canada, and they wanted to move equipment from one province to another. And they realized that the provincial regulatory environment did not allow them to move a piece of heavy equipment that was much difficult. And then, you know, what his point was is, you know, I'm German, I'm in the same country, and, you know, we have 5 mines. We want to be able to move our equipment around. We're not asking for any special dispensation. And, you know, it's those types of things. So maybe to your point, it's maybe we need better regulatory alignment nationally and between provinces, so that a company like CHAR, which will have, you know, facilities in different parts of the country, can operate optimally and not deal with, I know we're not allowed to say bullshit, but not deal with regulations that just don't make sense. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my view on it.
I should tell you, Nick, my new retirement plan was to get a swear jar. So we get $5 or $10 every time someone swears, because it's not a quarter anymore. The problem is I'm the worst offender, so the economics don't really work. Anyway,
Yeah.
we have time for 1 or 2 more questions if they're relatively brief. Anybody else?
Because you brought up the M word, which is mining. And I know it's not relevant for CHAR, but
Yeah.
I've got one chance, so I'm going to ask it.
Go for it.
If the politicians are for battery plants, that's a technology solution. Great. When are they ever actually going to be for mine building? Or is that simply something they feel won't be supported by the public and it's dead?
You know, we last night, one of the discussions, and you know, the Germans actually said that Canada is a really good place to mine, which kind of surprised a lot of the Canadians. Actually, one of the reasons why they said that is because we have a culture of investing in mines, because, you know, for anyone that's into the market, and James would know this better than I, you know, Toronto's a big hub for mining investment. And that was actually one of the great differentiators when the Germans were investing in Canadian mines, because they believe that there's an ecosystem of investment in Canada that doesn't necessarily exist. Especially, they'd say it's better than in Germany for them to do that, the mining ecosystem. So, okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Let's have a round of applause for Nick. Perfect. So that wraps up the formal part of the morning.